A millionaire humiliates a cleaning lady in the hotel lobby. Minutes later, everything changes, right before everyone's eyes. He speaks without raising his voice, like someone delivering a verdict. This place isn't for you. The marble gleams, the lights mirror his expensive suit, and the eyes around him freeze. 2 cell phones rise, discreet as periscopes. The background music continues, but it suddenly feels distant. The woman holding the cleaning cloth doesn't argue, doesn't bow her head, doesn't exchange words. She simply finishes what she was doing, wrings the cloth slowly, and makes her way out. The silence that follows isn't one of acceptance. It's one of anticipation. Gradually, the scene exhales again. The cleaning cart slides past the luggage. A couple whispers. The check-in pen moves once more. Those who watch notice details they normally wouldn't. The reflection of the shop letters on the glass, a narrow stripe of sunlight crossing the floor, the faint glow of a digital panel in the background. For a brief instant, that panel flashes an unfamiliar icon. No one notices. No one, except her. The cleaner moved in small, practiced gestures, as if the building itself had choreographed them. A child runs near the carpet, loses balance. She catches his shoulder at the exact centimeter before the fall begins. An elderly man bumps into a signpost. She steadies it before it topples. A glass tilts. She adjusts the tray without a word, with the ease of someone who saved that moment 1,000 times. No fuss. No spotlight. The millionaire walks off with 2 assistants, greeting someone with a rehearsed smile, holding an elevator door without looking back. The people who saw the scene assume it's over. But the end of a sentence isn't always the end of a story. The woman fixes a crooked wheel on her cart, passes by the reception, and, in the smallest of gestures, glances again at the blinking panel. The icon appears once more, disappears, then reappears. A silent request for attention. A different scent cuts through the air for a second. It's not from the store downstairs. It's subtle, but enough to raise the eyebrows of anyone used to noticing what others ignore. It comes, fades, tries to return. The woman follows that invisible trace with her eyes, as if tracking a line drawn through the air. She doesn't call for help. Not because she doesn't need it, but because it's not time yet. Her hand touches the steel railing, and she feels a vibration, so faint it could be imagination. Could be. But imagination doesn't flash on panels, nor draw perfumed paths through the lobby. She inhales, organizes a mental sequence of steps, and pushes her cart toward the side corridor, where the sounds fade, and decisions become clearer. A few steps ahead, an automatic door opens slightly slower than it should. Just a second longer. Maybe no one would notice. She does. And before anyone realizes that perfection has cracks, the story has already begun to turn, quietly, like a tide deciding to shift sides. The cleaning cart moved like a silent boat, weaving through the lobby between suitcases and hurried footsteps. With every turn, the woman took note of the space, the chandelier's shadow along the walls, the faint whistle between the glass doors, the subtle shift in air circulation. It wasn't surveillance. It was care. An elderly woman leaned awkwardly to reach the check-in pen. The cleaner's hand appeared before hesitation became imbalance. A gentle touch on the arm, a discreet smile, the pen placed just right. The gesture was so natural it seemed rehearsed by the architecture itself. At the cafe corner, A tray slid toward the edge of the counter, nudged by a stubborn napkin. The woman repositioned it with 2 fingers, twisted the napkin to cancel the slope, and moved on. The barista watched her go, not sure why. Some kinds of care you only notice when they're missing. Here, they happened before anyone needed to ask. The panel blinked again. Just a flicker, like a coded message. The woman glanced without glancing, as if checking the time in a reflection. She didn't stop walking but adjusted her route, leaving the center of the lobby for a quieter corridor, one rarely visited by passers-by. In that corridor, the hotel's sound changed texture. The chatter faded. What remained was the hum of air, the rhythmic click of a distant machine, the faint purr of elevators. She pressed her fingertips against the wall, a test no one would notice, and felt a difference in temperature on the left side, as if the building breathed warmer there. The second automatic door opened with a micro delay. A second barely exists, but in a place built on precision, a second speaks. She tilted the cart sideways, aligned it with invisible care, and waited. The sensor obeyed. The passage opened. She entered the service corridor as if she hadn't. The shelves were perfectly labeled: cloths, liquids, gloves, codes. She touched 3 items without looking: a folded warning tape, a small flashlight, a marker that writes on smooth surfaces. Her hands moved like they remembered the map of an old game. Back in the lobby, that unfamiliar scent returned, not floral, not sweet. It had a faint metallic note, almost too clean. Most would ignore it. Those who know, pause. The woman inhaled once, calibrating her senses. It wasn't a problem. Not yet. But problems prefer to be born when no one's watching. She passed a family arriving. The boy covered his nose, not out of discomfort, but instinct. The woman smiled, the boy smiled back, as if they shared a secret. The father thanked her, without knowing why. That subtle scent didn't travel straight, it curved, like a loose thread drifting in the air. She followed it to the base of a column, where the molding reflected the lobby lights. There, a thin trace of condensation drew a faint line, like the mark a cold glass leaves on the wrong table. She shone her flashlight just enough for her own eyes. The mark vanished, reappeared, then decided to stay. The music rose half a tone. Arthur emerged from the elevator, laughing with someone important. Polished smiles, confident strides, the posture of someone who believes he owns the room. The woman kept working as if the room owned itself. She wrung the cloth, adjusted the cart, and tucked the folded tape into her apron. Not to use now. For when time asked for it. The panel blinked again. This time, not just an icon. A brief cluster of numbers visible only to someone who stared half a second longer. Half a second means everything when everyone else is in a hurry to look away. She took that half second, memorized the pattern, and stored it like a name. Then she walked on. The hotel looked the same, but it wasn't. And whoever notices first wins the minutes the rest only discover when the clock starts to charge. The first sensation was a light pinch in the chest, as if the building had held its breath for a moment. Not an alarm, an omen. She felt it in her shoulders, a barely perceptible adjustment in posture, the body preparing without saying why. Her heart didn't race, it stayed alert. There's a kind of calm that never sleeps. She lit it. The panel in the back, the one everyone treats like decorative wallpaper, started blinking again with the stubbornness of something that wants to be heard. No sound, no screaming colors, just a small deviation in rhythm. It was enough to raise a neat line of goosebumps along her forearm. Not from fear, from recognition. It was the sense of "I've seen this movie" mixed with "no one's looking at the right scene." People, meanwhile, lived their own soap opera. The couple at check-in went back to whispering, but now they glanced toward the cleaner with a new curiosity, as if they sensed she held an answer that didn't yet have a question. The receptionist, who pretends at neutrality from clock in to close, gripped her pen too tight and left a faint mark on the paper, a line that shouldn't exist. The barista exhaled shorter when he saw the woman pass, grateful for a gesture he couldn't name. Small signs that the room's emotional temperature had changed. And then that earlier scent returned, only now it brought an invitation. Like the memory of a place you're not sure you actually visited. The woman inhaled slowly, eyes closing for less than a second, and her face found a new shape, serene concentration, like someone separating noise from message. The air was saying something. She listened. Farther back, a child sensed the same and squeezed his father's hand, not in alarm, but in search of certainty. The father answered with a quick smile, trying to send calm, while his chest created a faint echo of worry he wouldn't admit even to himself. That's how it starts, first in the skin, then in the thought. The woman approached the column whose baseboard had held that line of condensation. The flashlight wasn't for others, it was for her world. When the beam touched the shine of the baseboard, she caught her own reflection for half a second, steady eyes, low breath, relaxed jaw, then focused where it mattered, the reluctant mark. She touched it with a fingertip, as if asking, "Are you really here?" The drop trembled and answered, "I am." There, for a heartbeat, was a choice. She could pretend she hadn't seen it, as is often expected of those who work in silence. She could push the decision to later, until someone up top said it was time. But something in that instant changed the math. It wasn't just a technical risk, it was a risk to her relationship with people, with the place, with her own idea of what's right when no one claps. She pocketed the flashlight, and the gesture came with a feeling like a warm thread crossing her chest, responsibility. Not the kind that hangs from a badge, the kind that lives in purpose. The warning tape in her pocket weighed a gram more, as if it knew it would soon stop being tape and become a "please, take care." When Arthur reappeared in view, talking to well-dressed men and careful laughter, a circle of attention formed around him. There was admiration, interest, and a diffuse discomfort too, like when a song plays a notch higher than the ear would like. He handed out pleasantries with the ease of someone who sees himself at the center of the frame. And for a few seconds, he was. But the frame was migrating. The nearest elevator opened with rehearsed smoothness, and still the woman noticed a micro-hesitation in the track, a metallic sigh that didn't match the rest of the hotel. Not a defect, system fatigue. And fatigue, ignored, chooses the worst time to speak up. A sweep of air rolled across the floor like an invisible cat, brushing the ankles of those standing still. Two people looked down without knowing why. The woman followed it with her eyes, mapping the direction of that shy breeze. Her whole body oriented like a cheap compass that, even so, points true north. She passed slowly by reception. The receptionist, no longer the same as a minute before, raised her gaze and met hers. They said nothing, but they traded a silent promise. "If I go, will you come with me?" The answer came in a barely there nod. The panel blinked again. This time, it revealed a pattern of numbers that only stays visible for those not eager to change the screen. She read, and something inside her abandoned neutrality. A spark of urgency pierced the calm, not to create panic, but to sharpen presence. Her face shifted a millimeter, an eyebrow drawing a hook of resolve. And then the thing happened that only the very attentive notice. For the space of a breath, the hotel seemed to listen to its own story. The chandelier didn't sway, the floor didn't shake, the bar didn't spill. But the atmosphere, that invisible boss louder than any sign, made a decision: someone should act. She pushed the cart to the side, heart steady, senses at full volume. The world didn't need to know what she knew. Not yet. First, she had to confirm. First, she had to protect without flipping sirens. First, she had to be big without being seen. And when she turned the corner of the side corridor, the building made that brief pause again, a suspended beat before the note that changes the music. A family entered carrying a piece of the outside world into the hotel: 2 suitcases, a folded stroller, the unhurried hurry of people who just want to reach their room. The boy scanned everything with that curiosity that measures the air. He didn't cover his nose, but his hand rose halfway, as if his body had learned to protect itself without thinking. The mother noticed, adjusted her backpack strap, and the father offered that "it'll be fine" smile adults use when they need to believe first. The unfamiliar scent, that clean stroke with a polite metallic note, traced its curve through the lobby again. It didn't assault, it insinuated. It skimmed past the cart, brushed the edge of the counter, touched the carpet, and chose precisely the spot where footsteps most often crossed. Livia perceived that invisible path as if she could see a low-opacity sketch on the floor. Not coincidence. A route. She regulated her breath and, inside, arranged a simple plan: protect without noise, guide without embarrassment, act without stopping life. She approached the family at exactly the pace that wouldn't suggest urgency, angled her cart to open a wider line of passage, and with a near-choreographed gesture cleared a path that steered them away from the sense curve. The boy's shoulders loosened. The mother thanked her with her eyes. The father, not knowing why, felt someone capable had taken the lead. Near reception, 2 guests chatted animatedly, one arm gesturing in the precise spot where that olfactory thread insisted on passing. Livia shifted a vase by just a few centimeters, enough to lift a gentle current of air that nudged the line of scent toward a quieter flank. It was like dipping a finger in a river to change its flow. The hotel complied. Across the lobby, Arthur followed his schedule: greetings, nods, that trained presence that fills a room with ease. The laughter was light, the posture impeccable, the confidence unshakable. His scene worked for those who looked up. Livia's worked for those who watched their step. The panel at the back flashed numbers for a fraction of a moment. Nothing that screamed urgent, everything that whispered attention. She logged the sequence and cross-checked it with the earlier vibration on the railing. The hypothesis took shape: if the scent follows the air's path, then the source isn't where it seems. And if the source isn't where it seems, swapping carpets and spraying air freshener would be like painting over the map. Her fingers brushed the warning tape in her pocket. Not yet. First, she needed to discreetly redraw the human flow. A bellhop passed, and with a brief nod, she asked for help without words. In under a minute, 3 cones stood in elegant formation, nudging the luggage toward a lovelier curve, as if it were design, not strategy. The lobby found a new choreography. walkers thought it was aesthetics. It was care. The family's boy, now a few meters away, breathed easier. The father noticed. The mother relaxed her neck. Quiet victories usually match the size of what they prevent. At the far end, a door to the service areas opened and closed with the same micro-delay as before. The background music hid it, but Livia's sense of presence did not. Between one step and the next, she decided it was time to confirm her hypothesis. She needed access to a specific corridor, the kind that never appears in brochures. Without fuss, she steered her cart toward the side, aligned her mental route, and prepared the small detail that would make a difference, turning an ordinary passage into a safe corridor without anyone feeling something was wrong. And as her hand reached for the marker that writes on smooth surfaces, the panel blinked for the fourth time. This time, it wasn't just numbers. It was a pattern. The side corridor felt like backstage, but it was where the hotel showed who it truly was. Livia parked the cart so it became a door without looking like a barrier. A bellhop hurried by. She raised 2 fingers, brief, clear, and he understood. He returned with a pair of cones. No apparent rush, only precision. The cones went down like chess pieces, not to close, to redirect. The suitcases followed the new curve as if it had always been there. She took from her pocket a marker for smooth surfaces and drew the slightest arrow on the edge of a low mirror, almost art, indicating the ideal flow. To the untrained eye, it looked pretty. To those who needed it, it was a message. The lobby reorganized in seconds. No announcement, no screaming banner. Invisible choreography. From the corridor's depths, Jonas emerged, maintenance uniform, feet that knew the path to machines. He hadn't been called by voice, he'd been summoned by the weather in the room. Livia pointed with her eyes to the distant panel, then to the railing. Jonas touched the metal and felt the same whisper she'd felt, a vibration that didn't match the hour of day. His brow tightened, the kind of worry that doesn't need words. They both looked up at the ceiling at the same time, as if rehearsed. The discreet scent drew its curve across the floor again, and Livia intercepted it by positioning the cart to create a soft wall of wind. The large towel hung in a way that suggested decoration. In truth, it bent the air. The current obeyed. The boy's mother, now seated, let out a breath without knowing why. Jonas opened a small inspection panel that most never notice, scanning shy indicators that don't shout, only insist. He nodded. The confirmation she needed was there. Something, somewhere, wanted isolation before it had to ask for forgiveness. Livia didn't sound an alarm. She took the warning tape in hand, but kept it folded, still discreet. Back route, her eyes said. The receptionist read that silent game and brought, unprompted, a key that only leaves its hook on special occasions. A key that doesn't shine, but changes outcomes. Livia received it not as metal, but as trust. The feeling that crossed her chest was the kind that warms, being seen for what you deliver, not for what you wear. On the lobby floor, Arthur widened his circle of greetings. Someone told a story, everyone laughed, and for a moment the general attention returned to him. It was the perfect scene to act without an audience. Livia and Jonas slipped through the service door without disturbing anyone's important conversation. Inside, the hotel sounded different. Fans, hidden water bodies, wires that sing low. The real world of buildings speaks in that tongue. On a narrow landing, 3 aligned valves waited for a decision. Jonas checked his watch like someone measuring courage. Livia placed her fingers in the right spots, breathed, and nodded. The turn was slow, measured. The flow changed course without spectacle. Outside, the discreet scent lost nerve, like rain deciding to fall in another neighborhood. Back in the lobby, the tape was still in her pocket, but the line on the floor that once asked for caution now invited passage. The family rose. The boy inhaled deeply and smiled with his eyes. The mother thanked her with a hand on her chest. The father lifted the suitcase with new lightness. And for an instant, the hotel went back to being just a hotel, only now with someone, quiet, holding the center of the board. It was then that the panel gave the clearest blink of the day. The lobby clock had discreet hands, but in that minute each second carried a weight you could feel on your skin. It wasn't the sound of time that changed, it was the awareness that it was running. A message swept through the corridors like wind that knows the way. An official inspection would arrive soon. Not words, a certainty that installs itself when fate taps on the glass and asks to come in. Livia received that certainty like someone catching a glass before it falls. No alarm, just precision. The panel repeated the numerical pattern, and the reading aligned with what her body already knew. The building wanted care now, not later. Her heart tightened and expanded at the same time, that double feeling of responsibility and aliveness. It was like holding an invisible thread that kept the fabric of the place without creases. At that exact moment, Arthur expanded the attention field around himself. More hands to shake, more smiles for the photos that weren't being taken, more phrases sculpted to impress. He presented the lobby like a trophy room. There was shine, there was pride, and a shadow of anxiety behind his eyes, something asking for applause before anyone could ask a question. His circle grew, and with it grew the risk that any technical gesture would look inconvenient. At the counter, Helena, the manager, wore a map of feelings on her face: respect for the work, care for the image, fear of choosing wrong in front of the one in charge. She looked at Livia and, for a second, the world shrank to two people who know what it is to hold a place with their own hands. No conversation, but the whole question traveled: is it time? The answer came in a nod that felt like an oath. Livia needed two simple, rare things: a key that opens where the hotel keeps its useful secrets, and a portable pump that, when it enters, quietly solves what could become a speech. The key was a few steps away. The pump was in a storage room that prefers not to be noticed. The issue wasn't distance, it was permission. As she moved to get what she needed, the air around Arthur reacted like a magnetic field. It was as if the atmosphere said, "Don't change the picture." He noticed Livia's motion in the corner of his eye and, with the firm politeness of someone managing an audience, extended his hand into the space, without touching, but blocking the path with a gesture polite on the outside and veto on the inside. The smile didn't change. The message did, not now. There was a second that lasted too long between her urge to advance and the need to wait. Melodrama doesn't need tears when the scenery cries inside. The chandelier seemed to shine a little brighter. The boutique scent insisted a tone too high. The carpet returned footsteps as if asking for calm. Livia felt the old dilemma vibrate in her chest. Which is more loyal, protecting appearances or protecting people? The answer rose from where the lasting answers live: commitment that needs no signature. She shifted 1 centimeter left, circled the barrier with grace, and reached Helena with a request that fit in a glance: "Lend me the trust you have." Helena drew a breath, touched her inner pocket, and placed the key in Livia's hand with the delicacy of someone handing over a secret. The cold metal warmed to skin. It felt like receiving a fully spelled out go. The pump remained. The storage kept it like a spare heart. The route ran through a corridor Arthur preferred to keep closed on inspection days. When Livia angled that way, he, without changing tone, raised his presence a degree, spreading influence through the space. The circle of guests rotated with him, like a planet pulling tides. The intention was clear: occupy the entire scene so nothing off-script could gain focus. And it was in that theater of lights that destiny's poetry decided to intervene. A guest, by chance, asked Arthur a trivial question, shifting the orbit a few steps. It was the millimeter of world Livia needed. She crossed the corridor like mist, steady-hearted, sharp-eyed. Every muscle knew what was at stake, not only the efficiency of a building, but the peace of those who trust a safe place to be truly safe. In the storage room, the air held the exact temperature of places where decisions sleep. The pump was there, ready to turn risk into routine. When she touched it, relief sounded like music, the resolving note after a long tension. The melodrama, until then lodged in her chest, gained a concrete ally in her hands. And as she turned with the unit in her arms, the lobby panel outside changed the rhythm of its blinking. The inspection was approaching. The service corridor breathed like a tired person, and that's where the truth began to show. Livia pressed her palm to the cold metal, felt the vibration no one notices when they're in a rush, and translated that tiny tremor into a map. Anyone who's kept a house running on a tight budget knows this language. It's the noise that asks for help before the problem makes headlines. Jonas opened a discreet panel, not the most visible, but the one that speaks in the dialect of older buildings. 3 gauges told a story in timid numbers. Needles do not lie. The first read normal, the second whispered fatigue, the third, in the least lit angle, pointed to a regular return flow. It's that kind of soul weariness we hide behind a smile until the body says, enough. Livia breathed in, not for courage, but to clear space for clarity. Whoever's been interrupted while doing the right thing knows the weight of doubt. Still, she chose to trust the reading born of her work. Her heart tightened in the spot where it always tightens when appearance is valued more than the safety of those passing through. The world's camera wasn't on her. The responsibility was. She signaled to Jonas with a brief motion, the kind of gesture a team understands without a manual. The key Helena had given slid in like a promise kept. The turn was precise, a third rotation, pause, another third, listen. The sound changed pitch, like finally finding the right word after swallowing so many wrong ones. Outside, the clean scent lost its courage. Not a miracle. Method. Even while stabilizing, the third needle asked for respect. Pressure is like an emotional limit, force it, and it bursts in silence. Livia laid a hand on the aged pipe and felt history in the metal. There was a part working beyond its agreed duty for far too long. Anyone who watches this kind of story knows the feeling, when you carry everything while no one sees. The day comes when the body demands a rest it doesn't know how to take. She isolated the tired segment before it could present the bill in a way that hurts. There would be no screaming tape announcing trouble. There would be a safe path drawn with delicacy. Back in the lobby, every gesture became an invisible embrace, the cone in the exact place, the discreet arrow, the smile that says, "Go ahead, I'm here." The boy breathed better, and that felt like applause that needs no stage. Anyone who's heard "this place isn't for you" knows how the sentence settles in the chest and tries to become law. In that moment, the narrative wanted to repeat itself. But the building, answering to a woman who knows real work, chose another story. The panel confirmed, the numbers aligned, the lobby fit its people again, and the pain of being invisible found, for a few minutes, the relief of being essential. The irregularity hadn't vanished, it had shown its root. Parts were needed that don't belong to improvisation. Time shortened. We learned who stood on our side. The hotel's air seemed back to normal, but that calm smelled like intermission. Livia knew, appearances rest before new aches. She walked with the cart, body serene, mind counting. Each step calculated what could still go wrong. The panel, quiet now, showed stability, but stability isn't peace. It's a pause. On her skin, she felt what many feel after fixing a problem and immediately hearing the inner voice. But for how long? The body relaxes, the heart doesn't. Jonas approached, eyes a mix of pride and worry. It's good, but he didn't need to finish. The but hung in the air. The old piping still carried the memory of overwork, the kind of mark that doesn't fade with a twist of a wrench. Outside, the ambient music changed tracks. The lobby filled with voices, rolling suitcases, fresh coffee. The world regained the rhythm that disguises risk. And that's when Arthur reappeared, bringing the same energy as an expensive watch, beautiful, precise, and completely oblivious to what pulses inside. He walked with investors, speaking of standards, of excellence, of details that inspire confidence. Each word laid a rug over a step still damp. Helena followed, forcing a smile that started on her face and died at her neck. As Arthur passed the spot where the air had felt wounded earlier, Livia discreetly observed the slight movement of his suit, the perfectly aligned hair, the mirror shine on his shoes. So much care for the surface, so little listening for the floor. It was like that in many places. She knew it, and anyone watching knew it too. How often does an elegant boss walk over the person who truly keeps the company standing? How often does someone fix the urgent while another receives the applause? Livia's chest tightened with a mix of empathy and resignation. This wasn't just work, it was a mirror. At last, Helena approached with a report in hand. Pressure stabilized. No apparent risk, she said in a neutral tone. Arthur nodded without truly hearing, eyes already hunting the next handshake. He didn't know, but the building was breathing easier thanks to the woman he still couldn't see. On the panel, a number flashed quickly, a reminder, the old problem wasn't dead, only sleeping. To fix it for real, they needed parts locked in central storage under rules that required a signature. And Arthur, the man with the signature, didn't want to hear about maintenance on an important visitor day. Livia drew a breath, eyes on the panel. She felt the same knot anyone feels when they know what needs doing but depend on permission from someone who doesn't grasp the urgency. It's the knot that tightens every worker's throat when common sense collides with hierarchy. 10 minutes, Helena murmured, too afraid to say more. 10 minutes to act unnoticed. 10 minutes to save the hotel from a future embarrassment. 10 minutes to show that invisibility can be strength. She nodded, and her whole body prepared to run without running. The elevator's chime sent a brief chill into the stomachs of those who knew what it meant. The inspector had arrived. The kind of presence that changes the air without words. The doors opened with a soft ping, but the echo crossed the entire lobby. Every employee straightened. Helena adjusted her badge. Arthur, who loves owning the room, adjusted his smile. Inspector Duarte walked with firm steps, a gaze that weighed without cruelty, a clipboard everyone both fears and respects. He was a man who believed in evidence. In the hotel, right then, wore too much perfume for anyone with nothing to hide. Livia watched from a distance, heart in a contained rhythm. She knew the corrections she'd made addressed the symptom, not the cause. And the building still carried a plea for help, hidden, but alive. She wasn't afraid of the inspector, she feared omission. She knew that fear in another form, the fear of speaking truth and losing your job, the fear of staying quiet and losing yourself. Duarte asked the kinds of questions experience teaches you to ask without changing tone. Who's responsible for maintenance? When was the return system last tested? Who signed the latest report? Arthur answered all of them with the elegance of someone who knows what reads well on paper. The phrases came rounded, the pauses calculated. Helena confirmed, nervous, avoiding eye contact longer than 3 seconds. But the truth hates interruption. It appears, sooner or later, even in the smallest details. A light tick in the ceiling. An indicator blinking off-beat. A guest wrinkling his nose at the same faint odor only the attentive had noticed earlier. Duarte turned his head. "What's that?" he asked, simple, without accusation. Silence. Livia inhaled. Now or never. Every muscle in her body asked permission to speak, and this time, she granted it. Her voice came calm, carrying the courage that's born from the despair of watching injustice repeat its script. "I can explain, sir. We detected a slight irregularity earlier. It's isolated, but it still needs a definitive replacement. If you'll come with me, I can show you where." Arthur tried to interject, a short laugh escaping. "Nothing serious, routine stuff. We've already taken CA." Duarte raised one finger, a gesture that requested silence without aggression. "I want to hear the person who saw it first." And for a moment, the world inverted its hierarchies. Every gaze turned to the woman with a cloth in her pocket and dignity in her chest. Livia felt her legs tremble inside, but kept her face steady. She guided Duarte down the side corridor, explaining clearly, without theatrics. The inspector followed, noting every word, each one weighing more than any of Arthur's speeches. On the way, the receptionist's heels clicked like timid applause with every step. Jonas appeared ahead, opening panels, showing what they'd done. Duarte looked in silence, and at the end, said only, "Correct. But I'll be back tonight to confirm the complete repair. I don't want improvisations." Helena nodded, relieved. Arthur tried to recover control of the narrative, flashing smiles at the investors. But the circle, without noticing, began to turn on a different axis. Livia returned to the lobby with her heart split between the fear of retaliation and the strange peace of having done what was right. It was the kind of ache many know well, the weight of being right in a world that prefers image to truth. When the inspector stepped away, the silence left behind wasn't relief, it was suspense. The kind that precedes the decision of someone who holds power in his hands and bruises in his ego. Arthur kept the smile of a man insisting nothing had happened, but his eyes said otherwise. Around them, the hotel slowly resumed its rhythm, the hum of vacuums, the clink of trays, trying to fill the emptiness. Livia gathered her gloves calmly, trying to look invisible again. but invisibility is a gift that fades once the truth has spoken. Helena came close, voice low. He'll want payback. Be ready. Livia gave a small, unbitter smile. I just did my job. And that simple sentence sounded like resistance. Arthur approached. The expensive scent of his cologne arrived before his voice. Congratulations, you had your moment of glory. But here, things work with hierarchy. Next time, ask permission before speaking to an inspector. Each word was measured, cold, trained to hurt without sounding aggressive, the sort of speech many have heard from bosses who confuse respect with fear. Livia lowered her eyes, but not in surrender. It was strategy. People who face this kind of person know, sometimes the best answer is the silence that keeps a plan. Understood, sir, she said. It won't happen again. Arthur nodded, satisfied with the appearance of submission. I hope not. I have a reputation to protect. He walked away, his footsteps blending into the music, a melody trying to mask the discomfort still in the air. Jonas approached, worried. He's going to throw you out. Let him try, she murmured. On the panel, a new signal blinked. Brief, almost imperceptible. But Livia saw it. She always did. And what it said wasn't pretty. The pressure was rising again. If the system failed that night, it wouldn't be a small leak, it would be a collapse. She drew a long breath. She had two options: wait for it to blow and prove she'd been right, too late, or act now, again, alone. She chose the path she always chose, the one nobody wants to walk, silent responsibility. While Arthur hosted the investors in the hotel restaurant, she and Jonas headed to the technical areas. The narrow, stuffy hallway smelled of rust and wet dust. Down there, the city felt distant, and every sound carried the weight of a warning. Jonas held the flashlight. If this blows now, the entire ventilation system goes down. Livia nodded. And the inspector comes back tonight. If he sees it like this, he shuts the hotel. So what do we do? Fix it before they find out. The flashlight shook in the young man's hands. Livia, by contrast, was serene, the calm you find in people who've weathered too many crises to be impressed by one more. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing old marks on her arms, fine cuts from past jobs, scars most would call ugly, but that told the biography of someone who doesn't quit. Hold here, she said, and the sharp music of metal filled the silence. Upstairs, the hotel kept its artificial shine. But in the basement, where cameras don't film and applause never arrives, a woman fought the collapse of an entire system. No fresh-pressed uniform. No audience. Only a determination no badge can teach. As she tightened the last valve, the metal's high whine eased into a softer sound, steady, balanced. Jonas blinked, relieved. Did it work? For now. Her for now always carried a prophecy. And what came next would change everything, in front of everyone. The lobby clock neared 9 at night when the metal tone finally steadied. Livia wiped her hands on her uniform pants and looked at Jonas. You can bring the system back online. He did. The air found new lungs, the lights stopped flickering, the building exhaled. Upstairs, the top-floor restaurant shimmered again as if nothing had happened. But inside, she knew, everything had changed. Arthur, mid-dinner with investors, received applause for a model act of management, unaware that the speech exalting him existed because of a woman in the basement. Destiny loves prime time. When the inspector returned later, he asked to review the system. "It's perfect now," he said. Then he looked at Livia. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, sir. And solving an issue like this isn't standard training. It doesn't have to be training to do what's right. Helena stifled an emotional smile. Duarte made notes and said only, "The hotel is safe, thanks to this woman." All eyes turned to her. Among them, Arthur's. The same gaze that carried contempt hours earlier now searched for ground. The mask of self-sufficiency began to crack, and behind it appeared a man who, for perhaps the first time, felt ashamed of himself. He approached slowly, hands trembling just enough for him to notice. "I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," she answered. "You just needed to respect." The words were simple, but they landed deep. Everyone felt it. That was the line people dream of telling someone who once made them feel small. Arthur took a breath, looked around, and for the first time didn't speak as a millionaire, but as a man. "You saved more than the hotel today." "You saved me, too." The next morning, when the staff arrived, a new car was parked by the entrance. A simple model, but beautiful, with a red bow still tied to the hood. Livia's badge lay on the dashboard beside a note. "For the one who proved greatness isn't tailored in a suit, but carried in a heart." Arthur. Livia stood still. It wasn't the car that moved her, it was the gesture. Public recognition. Repair. That this place isn't for you, finally returning as you've always belonged. Guests applauded, colleagues smiled, and the boy from earlier ran to her with the same bright look from the start. "I knew you were a hero," he said. Livia smiled, resting her hand on the hood. A hero is someone who keeps going, even when no one believes. At last, the hotel was whole. And the silence that followed wasn't fear, it was gratitude. Sunlight poured through the lobby windows as if the hotel finally had something lovely to show without needing luxury. The glow didn't come from the marble, it came from faces. The staff moved lighter, the air felt clean, and for the first time, the reflections on the walls showed a place complete, not just pretty. Livia arrived early, uniform as simple as ever. She stopped in front of the car. The red bow now fluttered in the breeze, and the note on the dash had already become a small legend among her co-workers. Some whispered, others smiled in silence. She opened the door gently, took in the scent of new, then closed it again. The car was a symbol, not a trophy. It was the world's "I see you" to those who hold up its structures. Arthur appeared in the lobby shortly after. He had the tired look of someone who'd stayed up all night trying to understand his own mistake. The man who, at the beginning, crossed the lobby like he owned the world now crossed it with care, like a guest. "I didn't know how to apologize," he said, stopping 2 steps from her. "Learn now?" "I learned watching you do the right thing without needing to prove anything." Silence followed. A good silence, one without weight. The kind of pause that comes after real forgiveness. "You could have let me fall," he admitted, "and it would have been fair." "Justice isn't letting someone fall," she replied. "It's giving them a chance to stand upright." Arthur drew a long breath. "May I offer you something beyond the car?" Livia thought for a beat. "You can." offer respect to everyone who seems invisible. They're the ones holding up what you show." He nodded, and there was the true turn, not the car, not the apology, but the change. The lobby, full of people, watched in quiet. Helena, Jonas, the guests, everyone felt they were witnessing something rare, a powerful man bowing without humiliation, a humble woman standing tall without needing a stage. Arthur handed over the keys with both hands, a gesture of humility. Livia accepted, not as a prize, but as recognition. "Thank you," she said, "but if you really want to thank me, give me a parking spot." He smiled. Done. That morning, the hotel's sound system began to play a calm song, and the revolving doors caught the sun. Outside, the car waited, but Livia didn't rush to it. She picked up her bucket, straightened her cart, and started the day as always, because what made her great was never what she received, but what she carried inside, the dignity of someone who knows her worth before any applause. The camera of life pulled back slowly, revealing the whole hotel. Inside, each person seemed to stand a little taller, a little more aware that greatness doesn't come on a badge. And on the invisible marquee floating over the lobby, the new title of the story could be read. "This place is, indeed, for you."